Hello, I'm Dr. Harriet Fraad.
And I'm Juliana Forlano here with our podcast, Capitalism Hits Home.
This is a show about the intersections of capitalism, race, class, gender, and all intersecting aspects of our personal lives, including the basic needs we have as humans to stay alive.
We hope to educate, alleviate, and activate as we all live with the burdens that we're experiencing under this capitalist USA.
We hope that this program can serve you well. It's brought to you by Democracy at Work.
Hi, Harriet. How are you?
I'm getting by. How are you?
Right. It's that idea of being COVID okay, that things are not
Yes,
okay, but right now I'm
exactly.
not experiencing an active infection and no one around me is at this moment. So that's the okay we're living with. We've
Yes, it is
our
indeed.
standards have
And
dropped.
we are certainly lucky, certainly relatively to the state of Texas.
Mm.
Because this week we saw a disaster in Texas that illustrated in neon what happens when you trust basic needs to the capitalist marketplace. The basic need that Juliana and I want to address in this episode is the need for temperature regulation. Human beings cannot survive if they're exposed to cold that is frigid, from which they're not protected, just as they won't survive if they're exposed to levels of heat from which they're not protected. And energy is used to heat and cool us. In Texas, the energy is provided by something, and you've got to hear this name because it's right out of 1984,
Mhm.
ERCOT, which means the Electric Reliability Council of Texas, which
Yeah,
is
that's
the
not a
most
good name for that
no, it certainly is an
organization.
ironic name for an organization that lets people freeze and die. In any case, heat regulation and cooling regulation is the thing for which they are in charge at ERCOT. And they decided, they were warned about extreme weather at least a year ago. They were also informed, as all of us were, by global weirding that it gets very cold and very hot, so you need extra precautions. But they decided to save money by not weatherizing their system. And the regulators in the Electric Reliability Council were bought off by the energy companies that didn't want to have to protect the valves on the pipes that brought natural gas, or the pipes themselves, or the oil pipes, or anything else, because that does cost money, and they wanted maximum profit.
Mm.
And therefore, the oil pipes froze, the valves froze, the natural gas pipes froze, and Texas was plunged into a deep freeze. 58 people died. One was an 11-year-old boy who died in his sleep because he froze to death. That's what you
Oh my
get
God, that is horrible.
for more profit. Yeah, it is horrible. And what happened was that within the ethos of capitalism, which is we do nothing for you, you pay taxes, we get away with not paying taxes and saving money at your expense, huge swaths of Texas were without heat, and we'll discuss later in the next podcast. They were also without another essential for life, which is water. And since they didn't have electricity, most of them couldn't even boil the water in order to have clean water. So they were deprived of basic life needs. And the destruction was terrible. People's cars froze, the pipes in their houses froze, and of course, the people who bore the hardest brunt of this preventable disaster were people with less money, people who live in trailers, who have less insulation underneath their trailer and in the walls of their trailers, which then fell apart and froze, and people were subjected to the elements. The roads to escape were closed. Now, some people obviously escaped. We know that their senator of Texas, Cancun Cruz, escaped to Mexico to have nice warm weather for himself and his family. And how could this happen? They're the Electric Reliability Council. Well, if we look at Ted Cruz, their senator, we can learn something which relates to what happened to freeze people, destroy their homes and their livelihoods and their children. And that was that there were two things that candidates used to have to think of when they served or even when they ran. One was the constituencies, the people they're supposed to serve. The others were their donors in America's pay to play system. So they had to please donors as well. Now, what Ted Cruz showed us is that Republicans don't have to worry about serving the people, only their donors. Donors like the Electric Reliability Council of Texas. So Cruz probably didn't give it a thought before he jetted to Mexico, having warned people to stay at home and not to go, particularly to Mexico, which has COVID. And he took his family there. And he took himself to the nice warmth, leaving the frigidity and death around him in Texas. Because for the Republican Party and many Democrats, serving the constituents is irrelevant because you feel you can buy the constituents. You could gerrymander the districts. You could prevent people who might vote against you from voting. And so what you have to worry about is only the donors. And that worry is what brought us the deep freeze and denied people a basic life need for capitalist profit. Curiously enough, and in a way rather cute, there was one area of Texas that was spared. El Paso, Texas, did not follow the rest of Texas' example. They didn't go with ERCOT. They went with the national grids. There are two big electric grids. The Mississippi River is the divider. They went on the national grid. By going on the national grid, they had to be up to par. They also have to be regulated, something that the rest of Texas, under the Electric Reliability Council of Texas, didn't want. They didn't want regulation. Regulation would have demanded weatherizing the pipes. No, that's extra money. And so what El Paso did is they got on the national grid. Once you're on the national grid, you contribute, you are regulated, you contribute to the national grid, and they contribute to you if you need it. So El Paso, Texas got extra energy from New Mexico and Arizona, and they lost power for 4 minutes. And the rest of Texas, well, a lot of which still has no power for more than a week, wreaking havoc. So there's a good illustration. Another good illustration of what happens when capitalism takes over one of our basic needs and makes it a commodity is that when people got back to their homes, people who had tried the lights and the lights didn't work and they left. So when some of their lights went back on, the lights were burning for a while. They got home to bills up to $17,000 because ERCOT charged them more as electricity became more scarce. They raised the price up to 10,000 times.
I also
So
noticed
people,
that ERCOT can, a lot of the customers for ERCOT had direct withdrawal from their bank account. And so ERCOT basically wiped out people's bank accounts, so much so that they came home to nothing in their bank accounts.
right. And that part of their exorbitant bill for which they couldn't pay, then they had to pay for electricity use while they were gone, because ERCOT charges more when electricity is scarce, because the way they allocate electricity is on the basis of who's got the money, not on who needs light or who needs heat in their home because they have children or the elderly and need special protection. And another
Harriet,
illustration.
you when we spoke about this, privately, you talked about some of the things that when the lights went out, that people suffered. I know you mentioned a young boy freezing to death, other people freezing to death. Can you paint the picture of what it is when lights go out for people for days in the freezing cold weather?
Well, what it is and what it was for people whose oxygen machines run on electricity, it meant death or extreme illness because those machines couldn't work. What it means is if you have electric stove, you can't even purify the snow by boiling the snow into water. It means that the pumps that pump the water into your faucet don't work. It means that everything shuts down and you're helpless. It also means that you can't call for help because the telephone lines are down. You're stranded, you're abandoned, you're alone, and you have no help. The mayor of Colorado City, Texas, got on the air and said to his constituents, pull yourself up by your own bootstraps. Don't ask government to give you what you want. We believe in government that's small enough that you could put it in a thimble and throw it in the ocean. He did have to resign because people didn't appreciate that message.
They don't. Yeah, but the Texans. I mean, I'm sorry, but Texas is a state where they do appreciate that message when it's convenient for them. But
Yes,
they're
and it
not
was
appreciating
convenient.
it once they see the failure of deregulation. I think this is actually, I don't want anyone to suffer, but I
Yeah.
think people need to see what a failed state looks like. And I mean failed state in the, the broader sense of the term, not just failed state of Texas. Um, as they continue, I wonder if people will continue to say, oh, deregulation, good idea. In these places where they have come face to face with what it is to have a deregulated electrical market, heating market.
I think that's so right. I think starting in the 1980s, Reagan started saying that your problems aren't caused by the corporations who happen to be bilking you, which he didn't mention. They're by big government. And what he was counteracting is big government was the best friend people ever had. The New Deal was big government. And it was FDR was the most popular president in US history because big government created jobs when they had a depression, which we haven't done. He said, if the private market won't hire you, I will. And he started the Civilian Conservation Corps and the WPA making artistic things for people, and the building roads and dams and providing government sponsored electricity, all of those things. And he was very popular. So they had to counteract that. And there's been a big propaganda that your problem is the government, when actually the government serves corporations and not you. And the Texas governments signed on to ERCOT and signed on to a company that could be bribed to allow the energy companies to save money while they risked lives. The right to life is very important. And if the right to profit exceeds the right to life, people are in desperate trouble. And that's what has happened. And I think another mayor, by the way, had to resign for a similar message about do it yourself, don't count on the government. Of course, why have you then? Why pay
Yeah,
your
right.
good
Can
health
I get your
insurance?
salary back if you're not
Exactly.
doing
And
anything
your
for
health
me?
insurance and your life insurance and all the other perks. Can we all have those? But I
Harriet,
think
what
it was a wake up call.
I hope so. And I also hope that they can wake up to not just the idea of a regulated government regulation of this market, but there is a step beyond a government regulated private market that we could take. And I think other countries actually have a, a public market. Could you talk about that a little bit?
Yes, we don't even have to look to other countries. The small city of Holyoke, Massachusetts has a public energy company. Certain political interests have tried to get people to vote against it, but it's extremely popular because they have reliable energy at much lower prices, of course, because nobody has to make a profit on it all. There's a sharp contrast which we really must point out. While Cancun Cruz was cruising off to Cancun with his family, because all he does care about is his donors, not his constituents, Alexandra Ocasio Cortez raised $5 million for relief for Texans. And that was as of the last I heard, that was yesterday. She's probably raised more by today. And she flew down and is working at a food bank because they're short of people for food banks. And she could do that because she's not counting on corporate donors. She's not counting on big capitalism. She's counting on the small donors who are more numerous and who see that she serves them. And that is a real lesson in a national socialist movement that is of the democratic type that Bernie stood for and AOC, Alexandria
Harriet,
Ocasio Cortez, stood for.
how does it strike you that a person who is in this moment in history personifying what it is to have a community of care, a politics of care, is a woman?
Well, I think that is relevant. Of course, ovaries don't always mean that. We can't forget Margaret Thatcher, who unfortunately was not a man in drag, although some feminists wish she were. And neither were any of the women, neither is Trump's daughter, and neither were the other women arrested at the Capitol. Boebert with her two-gun Boebert, with her holster. However, since we create life and nurture life, I think we have more of an appreciation for sustaining human life because we know what it takes out of our labor and our bodies to do that. Because we are the ones who are still overwhelmingly responsible for children, for helpless life. And we have all the lessons that come with nurturing life.
And the
What
elderly as well,
and
who
the
suffered
elderly who
greatly
are the
during
caregivers.
this.
That's right. And our jobs are often, 43% of American women's jobs are pink collar jobs, often in caring professions that are badly paid, like home health aides, like nursing assistants, like nurses' aides, like care people at old age care homes, like babysitters, like early childhood teachers, who, by the way, are paid less than parking lot attendants in this country.
Mhm.
And so, although we're paid badly because our jobs are often an extension of our female unpaid labor at home, we are the caregivers. And so, of course, that might extend, and not in every case, but it can extend. But
I think there's
here,
even a metaphorical
AOC,
there's even like a metaphorical image of the mother, um, in my
yes,
mind. There's, it might not
yes,
be
there is,
specifically related to body parts, etc., or identity, but there's something about the mother image, um, that I think is valid and necessary. And you drew that point about women doing the caring work.
yes, because we are the mothers. And Unfortunately,
I think
in
if
our
I mean
country,
it's
we do have
are
what's
there a
called
lot of people
public.
running out there to say we need to deregulate everything so people don't have heat in their homes and go F yourself? That are these politicians women?
No,
I don't know.
they don't draw that conclusion. They say we need to deregulate because that's democracy. Of course, it's freedom for the people making money who are free to make money at our expense. And the contrast between AOC and Ted Cruz is a good example. Because if
Well,
you
also, Harriet,
allow,
it's not to mention that the things that they are privatizing are things that are in the ground, right? This is if they're getting natural gas, they're just saying, well, we have the mechanism to get the natural gas, and therefore we should get to have the natural gas, and it's ours, and it's as the corporation, and then we get to sell that to you. When really, if the natural gas is in the earth and we are cracking it and taking it out, yeah, you can have a cut of it, but isn't that natural gas? This land is your land, this land is my land. Shouldn't that be a shared
of
um,
course it should.
commodity in the whole
It
United
should.
States?
And
It's
not only
sickening
that,
that we wouldn't see
Juliana,
it that way.
they get an oil depletion allowance for taking the oil out of our land and depleting our land and the wealth that belongs to all of us because they can control and buy our political system, which makes it the best democracy money can buy. And I think that the kind of atrocities that are committed in the name of profit in Texas, in everywhere but El Paso, which goes on the national grid, big government again, helping people to help one another if any of their participants are in trouble. So they got
You
New
know,
Mexican
this
resources
idea,
and Arizona's.
this ideology of, pull yourself up by your bootstraps, go dig a well if it's, rainy, or if you can't get water, make a fire in your living room. That is all well and good if we were all frontiers people. But the fact is, you are forced to be on the grid. So if you are forced to be on the grid, then shouldn't the grid have some responsibility to provide you with the services? And just what sickened me about the whole story is, and you touched on it at the top, is really the idea that Texas has a history of climate denial, and they've been denying that climate chaos is even a thing. Meanwhile, a lot of their economy is based on extractive industries,
Fossil
fossil fuel
fuels,
industry.
need
So
that.
their income, their money, their economy is contingent on their own denial of climate chaos that they are causing. And then climate chaos struck them. Now, scientists don't like to say this particular weather system was part of, we have to measure, no, you don't. It doesn't snow in Texas for 4 days. It maybe once every 500 years, but this is part of what climate chaos is. They should
Yes,
have
it
seen it
is.
coming, and should
Well, they
be
did
the
see it coming.
irresponsibility. The irresponsibility is what really irresponsibility that
Well,
just
they're
leads to.
responsible to their shareholders. That's who they're responsible to, not the population they're supposed to serve. And if they say we do it all for you, we know we do it all to you. We're doing it to you, not for you. And that's the responsibility they take seriously as good capitalists. We are responsible to our shareholders to make a bigger profit. And if there's a human cost, forget about it. I remember in the defense of the drug Zyprexa, which they said was safe to use for children, and it made them obese, it made them depressed, and it didn't help their problems. But when asked, then why do you they got a $3.4 million fine. They made 17 billion. So, and a doctor who excused that was asked, how could you got the biggest fine in history? How could you approve of this? And he said, hey, when you're racing towards $17 billion, you pay the traffic ticket. It's an
Oof.
investment. It's not people. It's not their lives. It's an investment. And they count on big donors to snow, I should say, snow is an
Ha.
apt word, to snow their population and to keep them from voting so that they can continue to profit at the expense of life. And there is no better illustration than the Texas tragedy of these priorities, that the right to life should triumph the right to profit. And we need that slogan because it's appropriate for us. And capitalism sacrifices life for profit, and it succeeds. That's its mission. Its mission isn't to sacrifice any life. That's the traffic ticket. That's what you pay to get more. What does it matter if these people die? You're making money. And that inhumane system is what we have to get rid of. Capitalism is brutal. And I think even the majority in Texas are beginning to see that. And I hope that Cruz doesn't get so many donations that he can fool people, and that the algorithms on Facebook and others don't breed hatred against those people who want to save lives and stop this profiteering and stop making heat and coolant commodities instead of basic needs for people that we all have to protect.
It was such a perfect opportunity to start our series on things that should be basic rights and should not be commodified in a capitalist or any other system, which is a series that we were doing anyway. So the Texas tragedy that's continuing to unfold has given, it's a perfect
Yeah, it's
in
unfortunate.
vivo news story that's happening right at this very
Sure
second,
is.
unfortunately. So
Yeah,
thanks
it's
for
a
the
great
example, Texas. We
illustration.
appreciate it.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. They don't appreciate it because they're suffering terribly. There are people in the cold for more than a week with no electricity and no heat and high bills and no pure drinking water and no oxygen running machines.
But the
It's
people
a
that
tragedy.
I, I guess sometimes I have it hard to have compassion for people who voted for this system and who support it. It's very hard because there are others who did not vote for this system and who could see this coming and who knew that this was a potential and on the horizon. Those are the people I have the easiest compassion for. And then those people who just kind of have been brainwashed by the trickle down economic theories, the theories that you mentioned earlier, Reagan's theories, the drowned government in the bathtub theories, the Fox News conservative theories. Those people I can also have compassion for because they've been brainwashed by what's going on. But the people who are like, it's, government is, we need small government, but I still want to have a fire department, but it's got to be private, those people, it's like hard to have a lot of compassion, even though they're
Well,
clearly deranged.
they watch they watch Fox News. They don't think it through. They don't think, yeah, sewage should
Oh,
be
Harriet.
privatized. Oh my God. They don't think
Oh, Harriet,
any of
Harriet, I'm sorry but I just noticed that the timer is telling us we have about 1 minute left and we have a little bit of
okay.
housekeeping to do. First of all, thanks everyone for listening and thanks everyone for your donations. We are almost fully self-supporting, so much so that well, not quite, but we're getting there. And
Sure.
but Democracy at Work, who supports us, has agreed to let us do a weekly podcast for another 3 months. We were doing the podcast was originally twice a month, and we really wanted to do it every week and talk to everyone every week, given what's going on. So we do appreciate your donations. If you can keep the donations coming. Um,
Please.
yeah, Patreon is a great way to donate to us. If you go to Patreon/capitalism hits home and make like a monthly donation, that is the only way that Democracy at Work knows that your donation is for this show. So we do encourage you to do that so that as they're keeping the books, they can see that your donation is specific to this, not specific to this program, but, we brought the donation in. That's what's going to keep us on the air. And thank you so much for everyone. We are going to continue to do this series of things that should be human rights. That should not be commodifications. Commodities. Next week, our next episode is on water, and we look forward to bringing that to you. We also, after we do this series, we're going to be doing, reader mail, maybe an episode or two on reader mail, just responding to what you've been mailing in. You can mail emails to info@democracy@work.org, and we'll get them there, or you can leave them as comments under this very video. Don't forget to subscribe to this channel, by the way. If you're watching us on YouTube, that really helps us. Thank you so very much for watching.
Thank you. Goodbye for now.